Fantastic. We're recording. Excellent. So, Garret, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Garret, meet everybody. Everybody meet Garret if you don't already know him. Garret is a writer, a speaker, a consultant, and a coach who works with all sorts of people, but I think predominantly sports professionals and athletes. I've really enjoyed his books. And I also listened earlier today to the webinar you did, Garret, with Michael and Jamie about getting into the game. And I've also posted that onto my Facebook group as well, because I think it's a really nice half an hour or so.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thanks.
So again, thank you. And Garret, I want to start by asking you then, can you speak to what you understand by this thing called free will, and what you've seen about that and what you understand about that, and you know, do we have it as human beings? Do we have free will, or is that an illusion? Discuss.
Okay. I'm free to discuss. I have free will to discuss.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'd start off by saying this. The experience or the sense that we have free will is not an illusion. But that's because what we truly are is freedom itself. And freedom echoes in the mind of the separate self, of the personal self. So we feel like we're the ones making decisions. We feel like we're the ones choosing. Our experience is that we have free will. But again, that's only because freedom, who we truly are, echoes in our minds, and it gives us the sense that we're in control. But the truth is we're not. And by the way, that is the reason we don't like being told what to do. Because we are freedom itself in truth. And the separate self, who this identity, this personal identity that we're convinced we are, that identity doesn't like to be told by other separate identities what to do. And that is because of the freedom that echoes in our minds. When spiritual teachers speak of free will, what they're doing, Kim, is they're making a concession to the separate self that thinks it has free will. They're speaking to the separate self, but while at the same time knowing that you could say God's will is the only will there is. So that's about all I have to say about free will.
Okay.
You can ask me any questions about that.
Okay. So if anybody's got questions, please type them into your chat box, and I'll unmute you. So can you say a bit more about this, the separate self and the true self, whilst people are doing that?
Sure. In many spiritual teachings, there is a description in some shape or form between clarity and clutter, between love and insecurity, between a wonderful mood and a crappy mood. So we talk about the human experience as the ebb and flow between these two states. So we say, for example, when you have a lot of thinking going on, you'll feel insecure. When your thinking clears, you'll feel secure. The true self and the separate self are another descriptor of the same experience. No different, no different. In my mind, they're a more precise descriptor, but that's just how I see it. It's not right or wrong. The true self being who you truly are, your true essence, consciousness, awareness, love, freedom, God. You might say the religious word would be God. Whereas the separate self is that sense, that activity of insecurity, of unworthiness, of anxiousness, of lack. Again, from the perspective of the true self, another way to describe the true self would be the one being we share. It's not possible to have free will. There's no one to have it. There's one being. So it wouldn't be possible from the perspective of one to say there's something called free will or choice, because there's nothing to choose from the perspective of love. Nothing to choose, no one to choose. From the perspective of the separate self, there is separation, and thus this idea, this experience that there is separation and there is the ability to choose and there is ability for cause and effect. Again, from the perspective of the true self, it doesn't understand it. The love doesn't understand separation. Love doesn't understand duality. Love, the one being, only understands one.
Yeah.
And this is the feeling, and everyone on this call, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but everyone on this call has experienced that out of nowhere sense of just pure love or pure okayness for no apparent reason. That is you falling into who you truly are. And again, from that perspective, there is nothing to choose, no one to choose. And then we forget, we fall out of it, and we're back to controlling again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But only one of those perspectives is true. And thus, free will is just the experience of the separate self. It's just an experience, a concept.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
So, Mary, do you want to come in with your question? If you unmute yourself.
Hi, Garret.
Hi, Mary. I don't see you, but oh, there you are. Okay, I got you. Hi.
My first question was, I've got another one now, but my first question was, when you're talking about God's will, are you referring to mind? Is that what you mean when you say God's will? My understanding of that is that the universal mind.
Yes, fine. Same word. Exactly. Same word. I don't, Mary, I don't use that mind in that realm just because I find it gets a little confused with personal mind. So that's just the way I teach. So I kind of stay out of that because I don't know who I'm speaking to. So someone may get confused. Are you talking about the personal mind or are you talking about universal mind? So I just kind of take that out of the equation, not knowing who I'm speaking to or how that may confuse someone. But yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Okay, go for your second one, Mary, if you've got it.
So I guess I'm just interested in this idea that the little, so again, different language, same thing, little Mary has a concept of free will. Big Mary just wouldn't need free will because it would always go with love. But seems...
Well, Big Mary is love. So yes, but you're on the right track. But Big Mary is love.
Okay. But I'm not always experiencing Big Mary. I'm not always experiencing that. I'm just not, none of us are on a day-to-day basis.
That's
so
true.
It looks, so like today, I had some, and we all did, insecure thought that I could have followed down the garden path, but I feel like I know that I don't have to do that.
Right.
So it feels, I suppose my question is, how is it helpful for me to think that I perhaps don't have free will or choice? How is that helpful?
Yes. Well, first, I want to don't let me forget what you just asked, because I want to come back to it. But I want to say something about what you just said about this apparent choice that you just made, and how it looks to you like you have the power not to follow that choice down that rocky road, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really important. They're both important, but I don't want to forget the second one. I can do that easily if you don't remind me.
Okay.
Would you say you have the power, or anyone has the power, to stop a thought from coming into his or her head?
No.
Right. But what you're assuming, though, is that you have learned something, and now you have the power, after that thought comes into your head, to not follow it if you don't want to. Is that kind of what you just said?
Yeah. So that I don't have to give it my attention.
Yes. So how is it possible that you don't have the power to stop a thought from coming your head, but then you have the power for the thought to stop a thought? I'm going to follow this thought down that road from coming into your head. You see, every thought, Mary, comes into your head. Every choice comes into your head as a thought. So you have a thought. You have a thought. I can get angry at my kid right now. And then that pops into your head. And then you have another thought. No, I'm not going to get angry at my kid right now. And you don't. And then you have another thought. I'm not going to. Then you have another thought. I'm going to have tea, not coffee. So every thought, it looks to us like the second thought, the choice, is in our control. But in essence, it's no different than the first thought that popped into your head. Every decision we make just pops into our head. You're not controlling that. It can't work. Thought can't work two ways. One thought can't just pop in randomly, but the next thought, I'm not going to follow that thought, that doesn't. Every thought pops in randomly. Well, it's not randomly. Every thought just pops in. It will look to us that we are controlling it, but it's simply not true. It's simply every choice presents itself as a thought.
Okay. And I'm still wondering how would you say it's helpful?
Okay.
Why is that helpful?
Yes, it's and the true answer to that question is it wouldn't matter to me whether it's helpful or not. In other words, my role is not to decide what's helpful. My role is to point out, to the best of my ability, how it works. But in my experience, Mary, there's always something helpful in how it works when you get right down to it. And so I'm going to describe to you what my experience tells me occurs when people start to realize that they're ultimately not in control. And in my experience, including my own, that's incredibly comforting to people when they see it. It's a removal of burden. They're not running the show. And ultimately, I would even say that that's a good barometer whether you're on the right track or not, because truth will always remove burden, not add it. And when people stop seeing that they're not in control, whether that's a professional athlete, a doctor, a gardener, me, there's a relief that sets in. It's an absence of burden. There's a freedom, of course, because that would make sense. That follows.
Okay.
That's how it. That's my experience and the experience of those I work with.
Okay.
Well, I want to say one more thing, actually, and it just occurred to me, Mary, and for everyone. The removal, the absence of personal responsibility. If we go back to who we truly are, the absence of the person, one being, the absence of personal responsibility would make a lot more sense from that perspective. And what we find is that those human beings who have the slightest hint of who they truly are, and thus understand that they're not personally responsible, those are the human beings who act in concert with the greater good, not the other. There's a false sense that we have to increase burden, teach accountability, and personal responsibility, and that will somehow improve behavior. But there is 0% proof of that. Actually, quite the opposite. The more we enforce personal responsibility, the worse behavior tends to get. The more we point people in the direction of who they truly are, which is the absence of the personal, of course, they then act in concert with love and peace and freedom and happiness, who they truly are. Someone who understands who they truly are is virtually incapable of unethical behavior. But you have to know who you truly are. From the perspective of the one being, no one would ever behave unethically. So we're removing the burden. It's a key aspect of my work with people, removing that burden, not increasing it. The absence of the personal. Love equals the absence of the person.
Okay, great. Well, Mary, you can always come back in later if you want to. So Libby, if you mute yourself again, Mary. Libby, why don't you go ahead and read out what you wrote there, or what you want to say?
Yeah, thanks, Garret. It's great to hear you talk, and you know what you say resonates with my experience. I think I found since actually experiencing who I really am, as opposed to intellectually getting a handle on it, but having an experience of it, I've learned that, you know, that's my true identity. And it now feels like life is living me. Like I don't even feel like I'm being guided to do things. It feels like things are just happening, you know? And I think, you know, what you said towards the end there, because the system is loaded anyway in the direction, well, it's love. It's just, you know, that's how the cards are stacked from the beginning anyway. So if you resign yourself to that, then in my experience, the things that follow from that, you're acting from a space of love anyway. So, you know, even if other people can't understand it all the time or whatever, you know, it's that experience of this is kind of happening anyway. So it's moving with it. It's going with it and not fighting it. So yeah, I just feel it's having understood, having really experienced it, I've now completely surrendered to it and I'm letting it live me. And in fact, it knows so much better than me anyway. You know, my experience has gone, it's so much better now that I've stopped trying to personally fix things or, you know, have expectations or agendas or all that stuff. Because, you know, life knows more than I do. It's like my parents, so you just resign to it. Yeah.
Very nice. I would say that's my experience also. And to be clear, Libby, it's not wrong if we do resist. You haven't made a catastrophic error if you do fight your experience, if you do resist your experience. Your insecurity when you do, though, is the sign that you have forgotten who you truly are. That's, you've placed your identity into something that is by nature insecure. Thus, you feel insecure. That's all. So that sign of insecurity is simply a reminder that you've taken yourself to be a separate, alone, isolated entity. And it's like a wake-up call. It's a blessing. And it's just important to know that it's not a sign of a life problem. It's simply we have forgotten who we truly are. And from that perspective, we could then kind of turn our back on the separate self and say, see you later. I don't have time for you right now. I got better things to do. I have a life to lead, as you just said, with ease. You know, you guys, you have to understand, using these terms, and you could change the terms, it doesn't matter, the separate self and true self. The separate self requires free will, the concept of free will, to survive. It thrives on the idea that it's in control. It wants it, it needs it, it craves it. Again, from the perspective of who you truly are, there's no one to control. There's nothing to control. And when we forget that, we will suffer, and we will dig into our choices, and we will look around and try to make better ones. It simply won't be helpful. Thanks, Libby.
Yeah, thanks. It's just one little final thing. When I remember this, it is the dance of consciousness. It's the play of life to forget so you can remember, because the joy is in remembering. You know, it's beautiful to be woken up to it.
Beautiful. That's wisdom. Consciousness, the true self, requires us to become this separate entity so it can relate to this world of form. It's the dance. It's the normal, necessary, unescapable, unconquerable dance. The only time we escape it is, well, I'll come back to one other time, but when we sleep, we escape it. When we die, we escape it. Actually, in between thoughts, we escape it. But it is the dance, absolutely, positively. Consciousness has the ability to assume the form of 7 billion separate selves, yet always remain one. This is a great illustration right here. We seem to be 33 different people, but in essence, we are remaining one. We are downloaded from the same source.
Amazing. Thank you, Libby. So I'm going to call on Christopher Chin now. Chris, do you have a question for Garret?
I do. Hello, Garret. Hi. I'm pretty new to this. And so I went on I spent some time in a conversation with Kim, and I really like it. And I think I began to get insights into mind, consciousness, and thought. But I'll let you know the kind of background of where I'm coming from. Just because sometimes I kind of wonder, and I think it's made a massive impact on my life. But sometimes I do kind of wonder, because in my youth I was quite religious, and I joined a church, and I recognized that sometimes when you build thinking or on some kind of philosophy or assumptions or presuppositions, and then the system kind of makes sense, So I'm just kind of checking in a sense because, and bear with me because I'm just rambling. So I don't quite know where I'm kind of going with this, but it's almost like we talk about the three principles, and the three principles are truth, and they just are wherever they are, and that's just the way that things are. But yet when we talk about mind, we talk about this collective consciousness, 7 billion souls, and it's just one, and the thoughts come from mind, and this illusion of free will. But my question is, how do we know?
Brilliant.
And I guess it's,
I got
and
it.
I'm just kind of checking, because in a sense, then it negates the thing of truth, and it becomes a bit irrelevant. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. It's actually an astute observation, and thus question. Now, you actually said some really cool things in as you were getting there. For example, you talked about, you picked up on what I was saying before about one, and you didn't say these exact words, but it played this way to me. And then you said, and then thought separates into 7 billion. That's actually a great way to describe it. We are one being. Thought superimposes itself over that one being, causing separation. That's right. I'll get to the truth part in a second. As far as that, I would look at when people say that, when I say that, if I say that, because I don't really know what I say, but if I say that, or if Kimberly says it, I would look at it more as we're questioning the current model. What I would say is, I don't even know that the current cultural model, the materialism model, okay, the model of the materialistic model, objective model. And for those who may be wondering what I mean by that that this phone is real. That model. That this phone can exist separate from me. That model. That without the power of experience, this phone would still exist. That this phone exists independent of consciousness. That model. That we are taught the minute we're born. So when I talk about truth, what I mean is I want to question whether that model is true, because it doesn't seem to me that that's the experience. So the model is 7 billion conscious human beings, one world. That doesn't add up. In my mind, that doesn't add up as true. Because as we talked about before, when we fall into that place of love and understanding, there is no other. There is no other. When I'm in an intimate moment with my wife, or even a friend, I don't want to make this about that, because that's not what I'm saying, but, or my children, or you, and we're in pure love, there is no other person. There's one. It's clear that we're not separate. The current model of separateness is flawed. There's something in it that's not right. So what I'm saying is, let's consider how we're doing in this world, how this world's getting on, which isn't so great. And perhaps we have it backwards. Perhaps, just perhaps, it's one being, 7 billion worlds. Perhaps that's true. Now, do I know for a fact that that's true? Well, of course not. But I do know what's at the core of even the religion you were talking about before, of that religion, of every religion. I do know that Jesus said, I am and the Father are one. It's everywhere at the core. So perhaps it's not 7 billion consciousnesses and one world we experience that looks different to us because of thought. Perhaps it's one being and 7 billion worlds because of thought. Again, in my mind, those who are in touch with the possibility that that's true are the ones that tend to behave in a way that I respect, that I want to be like. Like you're talking about Jesus and Gandhi and King and Mandela and Mother Teresa and Sid Banks. That's who you're talking about. And these words like mind, consciousness, and thought, in my humble opinion, sometimes cloud over the simplicity of what we just talked about, what we just said. Sometimes, because they're words that are used in different ways, as I pointed out with Mary before. Mm. So sometimes we get a little tricky. And Sid, what I understand, Sid struggled with that too. There was 5 principles at first. So we don't know, but we don't. But when you get right down to experience, it's crying out of one being superimposed over by thought and causing separation, causing illusory separation. So we've done our best to put words to it, to explain it, to teach it, and that's what we're doing today. Yeah. That makes sense? I hope.
No, it does make sense. Cool. And I guess the last bit of what you said, therein lies my question. If we don't know, why do we call it the principles? Because the principles themselves are, by definition, we do know. Is that am I?
No, you're fine. But you don't. I like you're probably talking to the wrong person about that. Right. Because I don't I don't talk about the principles. So
okay.
You're pretty much explaining why I would keep away from that. I will tell you a funny story just because it's funny. I was giving a speech at a fairly large audience. It was, I don't know, tons of people, and it was at the like professional golf has a conference at the end of the year, and I was one of the keynote speakers. So anyway, I have a bunch of my clients in the audience. It's a large audience, and some of my clients are in there. And somebody during the Q&A gets up and says, "I love that you're bringing the 3 principles to this." And I didn't even say anything about the principles. Anyway, because I guess he just knows my background or whatever. It's fine. But what was interesting is my clients came up to me, and to a man and woman said to me, "What are you holding back? What's the 3 principles? When are you going to tell us about that?" Oh my goodness, it was quite kind of funny. But they just sometimes, because of the community and stuff, there's nothing wrong with the 3 principles. Is just a descriptor. It's all it is. It's fine. It could be. It's just a descriptor.
It's the language that gets in the way, basically.
It's the language that gets in the way. But if we understand that, it won't get in the way. That makes sense. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Chris. And I'm just going to read what Libby's just written, just because it's germane to that point. She says, a branch of quantum physics, Bayesian physics, no longer supports one single reality. It's worth checking out Marcus Muller's work. So those of you that are interested in the science. And in fact, I wrote a blog about this a few weeks ago about all the physicists now that are sounding very spiritual, actually, in some ways.
Well, Kim, what's happening with the physicists is they're starting to wake up to the fact that they cannot find the universe. They're starting to wake up to the fact that they cannot find matter. So they can look and examine, but nobody, and this goes back to experience, nobody has ever proven that matter exists. It's unprovenable. So we're starting to say, wait a second, this subjective paradigm is seriously flawed. And instead of digging down deeper and trying to find matter or the universe, what they're waking up to is that, oh my God, this phone does not exist outside of experience, outside of consciousness. Without us to experience it, it's not here. Yes, I'm touching it, but that's experiencing it. This phone, my experience of this phone, I'm experiencing consciousness, not a phone. This is essential. Essential. It's a figment of consciousness, not a figment of matter. And by the way, when we talk about inside out, Chris, another word that people use for the principles, this is at the heart of the inside out paradigm, because if this world and the things in it cannot exist separate from me, they don't have an impact on me. It's not that because my mood determines my perception that can't affect me. No, it can't affect me because it's not separate from me. That's why.
Great.
It's not that I'm feeling my thinking, not the phone or not the circumstance. No, my thinking is creating the circumstance does not exist separate from me. It can't hurt me. It is me.
Great.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna jump to one now from Sarah Parker, which is a very I suppose a question rooted in the current paradigm in many ways. But Sarah, over to you.
Hi, Garret. I guess if I'm honest, my mind's a little bit, well, I'm stuck in thinking at the moment, trying to work all this out ridiculously. And I think as you've been talking, I kind of want to change a bit of what I've asked, because my understanding is that when we are always one, and we are, when we recognise that and we're in that love, then we're not gonna require free will. We're not going to behave in a way that's not loving. But if we think about society as we are, and if we think about that in terms of we don't have free will, then how do we work with a justice system that kind of wants to punish behaviours on the pretext of having free will? I guess what I'm saying is I can understand that when people are not in that place of love and unity, then perhaps they're going to behave in a way that is not loving and potentially criminal. But how do we work with that going forward?
Yes. First, it's a good thing that you're trying to work all this out in your head. Don't worry about that. That's not a bad thing. And sometimes in this line of work, people talk about that as a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. So it's okay that you're trying to work it out in your head. Nothing wrong with that. Second, the only way we do it, Sarah, only way, is in our own way. We remind people, we remind that separate, insecure, isolated individual who thinks that's what he or she is. We remind them of who they truly are. That's the only way. Not discipline, not rules, not punishment, not anything else. There's nothing else that has ever or will ever work. 0%. The only way, again, in our own way, I would, if I sat with one of you and you were working with someone, or you were giving a talk and you sounded like me, that wouldn't be your own way. That would be my way. That would be a mistake. Then you haven't learned.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it feels, in my thinking, quite overwhelming, the fact that there are so many people that are not aware of that universality of our love. That's the work, isn't it? But it just feels quite huge in the current society.
Well, from the perspective of Sarah and Garret, who want to make this better, it will always feel that way. That's okay. We're going to work it out in our heads, right? But when we step outside of that, it'll make sense, and we'll find the inspiration to keep going. It's okay. Welcome to my life. It's a constant ebb and flow, as I talked about before. But that's okay. That's okay. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
Okay, you got it. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Brilliant. So can I ask Elizabeth to come in now? I think Elizabeth is on her iPhone. Elizabeth? Oh, there you are.
Hey, Elizabeth. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, I've unmuted you, Elizabeth.
Oh, hi. Hi. I think my question somewhat is slightly probably a bit late, I suppose, in terms of where the discussion has been going. I think I came on here and my interpretation about free will was, I think something you said earlier on is about free will. We are freedom in our minds. That's my understanding. And I get that. I think for me, it's about where you go with your free will. Some of this kind of alludes a little bit to what Sarah was saying about I can have free will in my mind and want and hope that I can lead by example in terms of people being good, being kind, learning from the error of their ways. I think the challenge for me is about, and I'm sticking with the free will, what really is that? How can I manifest the freedom in my mind that I have into a reality, a form, a reality?
Well, you don't have freedom. You are freedom. You don't have to manifest anything. You are freedom.
Freedom operating in a society that has social construct, has social fabric.
Right.
So the free...
But Elizabeth, my role as I see it is not to dive into the constructs. It's only to remind people, as we were just talking with Sarah, of who they truly are. And who you truly are is freedom. Now, there's other words that I could say: awareness, consciousness, love, resilience, passion. Also, these are all words for the true self. Or God is another one too. Sid used to say, "God I am not." So the you don't manifesting freedom is stepping on the gas pedal with our tires in mud. You cannot manifest who you are. It's effort. It's doing. It's grind. Knowing who you are is how Mandela survived 27 years on Robben Island. He knew who he was. The circumstances We're not the issue.
Is that okay? I mean, is that knowing or having such a strong belief system around?
No,
okay, well,
it's nothing to do with a belief. Nothing to do with a belief. Nothing. It's not a belief. Belief would be, a belief is a activity of the separate self.
Mm-hmm.
So just sit with who you are. That's why we hear things like no one could take your freedom away from you. These kind of expressions. It's always who you are. Another word for who you are is meditation. And it's a good example. Many these days are convinced that you have to meditate to get to who you are. That's preposterous. You are meditation.
Okay, I'll need to really, I will need to consider, think about we are freedom. And I suppose it's because the environment that I work in, which unfortunately is one of the unfortunate aspects of human behaviour, in terms of West End sex offenders, I have to really stand it. I'm struggling with we are all freedom. I'm struggling with that.
And by the way, Elizabeth, I want to be clear. I'm not making light of the practical. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
I mean, if we had hours, I could get into that more. But I'm not making light that there are certain practical aspects to this life we lead, and what goes on in this world of form. I'm absolutely not. Okay. Absolutely not. Not even a little bit. I hope I don't come across that way. I'm just saying that those offenders have forgotten who they are. If they knew who they were, they wouldn't be behaving. Even in the predominance of the separate self, what happens is the more you wake up to it, who you are, and that realization slowly but surely starts to pervade into the foreground, from the background into the foreground. And that's as you see behavior starting to clean itself up. So one of the things that we sometimes get confused about is we think bolt of lightning and we're going to see it all at once and everything is going to change. There is nobody in the history of human beings that's experienced that. It's impossible. It's a slow progression. It's a patient progression from the background to the foreground. That's why I said to Sarah, don't worry if the intellect is trying to figure it out. That's okay. That makes sense. Because it sees something and then it wants to grab hold of it. And that's normal and it happens to all of us. But that's why I remind you that knowing will slowly pervade into your life without effort.
Okay.
Every morning, I wake up and think I don't know anything. Before this webinar, what are we talking about? Oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm going to say. I'm blank. I'm a total dope. Then slowly but surely it starts to kind of creep it up in there.
Yeah, I understand that completely. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Elizabeth. And so, we're running out of time. Oh no. Terry Runyon. Terry Runyon.
Hi, Garrett.
Hi, Tara.
And everyone.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. I love this conversation. I am getting so much out of it. One of the things that was occurring to me is this sense of when you are in that awareness, this knowing of the oneness. I wonder if that is where all questions are answered about where you're gonna, what's gonna come out of your mouth, what it is the next move will be, where your foot will land as you move forward. And is there any other way to move? Is there any other way to know? I mean, that is the knowing. That is where wisdom comes from. Like you, I have no clue as far as on my human level, my Terry level, but I know something bigger than me that I am, totally am. I mean, you can't not be it, knows what the next move is, what's going on in the moment. So, on a practical level, I have all kinds of questions. Like all kinds of stuff comes through your field of, well, how does this relate to, Donald Trump or whatever we're going to do in our lives to, get this out to humanity. And another part of me just says it is already done. There's nothing to do. When I'm seeing from that place, there is no problem. So I don't know how to work. I mean, I'll never know how to work with that on a practical level. I love that you see yourself as a person who is just here to help people remember where they've never left. And maybe that's what we're all doing together.
That's a good job description for me. Thank you. I'm going to use that from now on. I'm just here to help remember. I mean, but that's what it is. That's what it is. It's consistently, unapologetically, in a black and white way, not giving in, not pandering, not saying something that may provide 24 minutes or 24 hours of distraction away from one's troubles. It's reminding them who they are. And that's it. The worst thing we can do, in my mind, if we're in the helping business, so to speak, is to just help people get distracted out of their experiences. We have to point people right at the heart of their experience with no wiggle room. It's the only way.
I wonder, when you're saying that, in my experience, the way that happens is me seeing it. I look out into my life and my world in those moments of clarity, and I can see there's no separation. I'm feeling that oneness. To me, that's what Jesus was doing. He's walking through the world and knowing, he's not concerned if people are getting it or not, because he gets it.
Exactly. That's
so.
Sorry, I want to say about Jesus. It's just to be clear. I want to be clear. Like, that's exactly what Jesus was doing. He was reminding people that we are a shared being. He was reminding the Israelites that they don't need to sacrifice the animals. That's a waste of their time. And you're killing animals as a coping strategy. That's not what we're here for. That's not part of the deal. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, the life." One of the biggest misunderstandings in the history of human beings is that when Jesus said that, he was claiming to be a channel through which people could get to God. That's not what he was saying. He was saying, "I am." He was saying, "I am God. You are God. I am what I am." Unfortunately, it was mistaken to point in a direction that he could come through me and I can get you to the creator. He was actually saying there is no creator. We are creation. We are one. We are not even oneness. That would imply that there's two, becoming one. That's why I say we are one being. which isn't even a great description. That's a concession in itself, because that's one too many. Okay, but just again, language, as Chris was saying before. I mean, so or we're not two. That's why Sid in the Missing Link talks about non-duality, non-dual, not two. And Jesus was the original non-dual teacher. What he was. I am. I am is the only place that the separate self and the true self meet. The I. The only place. I am. So I sometimes tell players, clients, I am insecure. I am anxious. I am angry. I am frustrated. I am compassion. I am resilience. I am understanding. I am love. I am. What's the common denominator? I am equals God. And that's what we're reminding people. Yes, people say, you actually teach this to professional athletes. It seems so out there. Yes, it is out there. Good. It's out there. It's how you know we're on the right track. What's real will always look unreal. Always. So.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry.
Thanks, Tara.
And yeah, well, we've come to the end of our time, sadly. I don't know where that went, but I've really enjoyed this, Garret, and so appreciate you taking the time, because I know you're traveling as well at the moment.
Yes.
And I know that many more people will want to be watching the recording as well. I'm certainly going to be watching this again. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, especially Garret, and sending you all love. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. You still there, Mary?
Yeah, I don't know why I haven't gone. My face is gone, but I don't know what I'm doing.
Your face is gone. Oh, well, what did you think of that then?